Okay. All righty. Okay. Okay, we are now live, and I'm gonna share. Okay. Okay, B, you see it, B?
We ready?
Okay, ready to go. So now we're gonna read the call to questions.
What is the likely outcome of the lawsuit?
Okay, so here we don't have, let me go into it. Here we don't have, here we don't have any terms of art, any concept, anything, right? So we go all the way to the top. Oh, I'm sorry. We want to see the next sentence, see if we can find the table, we can find the the umbrella. So I saw here is landlord. Can you read right here, from about right here, landlord?
The landlord was on an extended trip abroad and did not learn of the default and the vacancy until last week.
Yeah.
The landlord sued the tenant and the friend jointly and severally for $350 or $3,500 for the last 5 months' rent.
Okay. So now we know there's a lawsuit going. We know there's a landlord and tenant umbrella, but here we got a landlord and tenant umbrella, but they don't sue just landlord and tenant, but they are suing tenant and a friend. And then we know about jointly and severally liable. Okay. B, what is the definition of jointly and severally liable?
So whoever if they're suing, either party can be responsible for the full amount, and then you can seek reimbursement. The other party can seek reimbursement from the other party.
Perfect. What is the likely outcome of the lawsuit? A,
both the tenant and the friend are liable for the full $3,500 because the tenant is liable on privity of contract and the friend is liable for privity of estate as lease assignee.
okay. So we know right now that it is jointly liable, therefore the whole thing is $3,500. And that is correct. And a tenant is liable because of privity of contract, because the original contract that the tenant signed with the landlord. Okay, that's called a privity of contract. So the privity of estate, meaning the tenant assigned to the friend. The tenant assigned to the friend. If a tenant signed to a friend, therefore a friend is a assignee. Okay. Now here's the rule, B. If you have 3 years left and you assign less than 3 years, then you're still liable. If a tenant has 3 years left and a tenant assigned it to his friend for 2 years, then the tenant's still liable. But if the 3 year left, if the tenant assigned all 3 years to the friend, then the tenant is not liable. So if this would be the correct answer, if in the fact say that the tenant assigned less than what he owned.
Mr. V, is that a sublease when it's less?
Yes. Yes. If it's less than a sublease, when it's a sublease, therefore the tenant is still liable.
Okay. B, the friend is liable for $1,400 on privity of estate which lasted only until until he vacated, and the tenant is liable for $2,100 on privity of contract and estate,
Go ahead.
privity of contract and estate for the period after the friend vacated.
So, uh, we talking about jointly and self-reliable.
Yeah.
B is not a definition of jointly and privily liable. See, jointly and privily liable do not tell you how much each one owed. It's only tell you that you can get 3,500. So here, B, break it for you and assign this number. That is not how jointly self-reliable. So B is contradicting the definition of jointly and self-reliable. So B is wrong.
Okay, so we can strike one without even reading the facts.
Okay.
B, the friend is liable for $3,500 on privity of estate, and the tenant is not liable because the landlord's failure to object to the friend's payment of rent relieved the tenant of liability.
Okay. See, here's another one. See, the bar examinee always give you something that is not in a contract. It's not in a contract. They give you some kind of language that is not needed. You see it?
So can we strike that one?
Yes, because the landlord failure to object of friend payment. In a contract, there's no such thing. How do you know in the future whether the tenant give it to a friend or to who, or they're willing to assign? There's no language that would build in a failure to object because it's not happened yet. How can I have that kind of thing? How can I build on that? So if you notice, the bar examiner always put in something that is out of the contract. And we learned from yesterday that we are lawyers. We look at the elements of the contract. We look at the elements of the contract. In this fact patterns, it gotta say that there's an element in the contract in that way, and the landlord objected. They failed to object.
Right. And there's,
but if you think that's not how they test about landlord and tenant.
yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Now
D. The tenant is liable for $3,500 on privity of contract, and the friend is not liable because a sublessee does not have personal liability on the original to the original landlord.
This is a false statement. A false statement because a sublessee is always personal liable
For privity of
to
estate.
the landlord. Why?
Is it privity of estate?
Yeah. So the tenant is liable for everything, and the friend doesn't liable anything because sublessee does not personal liable. No. So you know that's wrong right there.
Now I know the answer. It's A, and we haven't even read the facts.
Don't smile too quick. The bar examiner gonna come down to see me. So isn't that awesome?
Yes. No.
And this is a ball release NBC and NCBE questions. All right, so let's go read the facts.
Okay. A landlord leased an apartment to a tenant by written lease for 2 years, ending on the last day of a recent month.
Okay, we know now, we always circle the party, landlord, we always circle the tenant, we write down the years, we circle, we underline rent because we want to make sure statute of frauds. Whenever we see the word oral, whenever we see the word rent, those are terms of art for us to apply the elements, and 2 years. So it's enforceable because it's more than 1 year, it must be in writing.
So
The next sentence.
The lease provided for 700 monthly rental.
Okay.
The tenant occupied the apartment and paid the rent for the first 15 months of the lease term until he moved to a new job in another city.
I'm sorry, I was distracted. Reread it for me.
The tenant occupied the apartment and paid the rent for the first 15 months of the lease term until he moved to a new job in another city.
So you see, he got 2 years. That is 24 months.
Right.
That's 24 months, and minus 15 months, right? So that means 9, right? He got 9 months left. If he leased the whole 9 months, then he is out. Let's see how many months he leased.
Without consulting the landlord, the tenant moved a friend into the apartment and signed an informal writing transferring to the friend his lease rights for the remaining 9 months of the lease.
Uh-oh. Go ahead, continue.
The friend made the next 4 monthly $700 rental payments to the landlord. For the final 5 months of the lease term, no rent was paid by anyone, and the friend moved out with 3 months rent or 3 months left of the lease term. The landlord was on an extended trip abroad and did not learn of the default and the vacancy until the last week. The landlord sued the tenant and the friend jointly and severally for $3,500 for the next 5 months' rent.
Okay. Do you know why we say that if he leased the whole thing, he's out? But here, notice that he leased the whole thing, he's out. But the facts say that he leased it without the landlord permission, without consulting the landlord. That's why he still have preview contract.
Okay. Had he
See
gotten permission, then he would have been off.
Yes. Yes. See it? This fact pattern put without consulting the landlord thing. So you know that he never got out of the contract. The original contract never destroyed. You see it? So the landlord have a contract with a tenant. Now a tenant have a contract with the tenant now have a contract with a friend. There's no signatures with the lease on the second lease to take him out. There was no novation, in other words. You remember the novation, you have a new lease, start over again. So there was no novation. Okay, so therefore the tenant is still liable. So that's why the answer is A.
A, do you want me to read it again?
Yes.
A, both the tenant and the friend are liable for the full $3,500 because the tenant is liable on privity of contract and the friend is liable on privity of estate as assignee.
See it? Makes sense?
Yes.
Now here we go. Let me clear. Let's go back to the mouth. Oh, I have to clear, otherwise I look funny. Okay. Now look at the answer. Read the answer for me.
A, correct. An assignment arises when a tenant transfers all or some of the lease premises to another for the remainder of the lease term, retaining no interest in the assigned premises. In this case, prior to the agreement with the friend, the tenant had privity of contract with the landlord because of the lease. The tenant also had privity of estate because the tenant was in possession of the apartment. Subsequently, an assignment arose when the tenant transferred the premises to the friend for the remainder of the lease term of 9 months. The friend was then in privity of estate with the landlord as to all promises that run with the land, including the covenant to pay rent. The tenant was not released by the landlord, however, and thus remained liable on privity of contract.
Okay, here is something different than the way I explained it to you. The way I explained to you that require the landlord to have novation with the tenant. They didn't even address that. You see that, B?
Yeah.
You
Yes.
see that? So watch out for that. So that right there is saying that it doesn't care. The privity of contract still exists because because it is there already, and there's the tenant, the landlord never signed a novation to get the tenant out. So how? So if we go back a little bit on our answers, it doesn't matter how much a tenant assigned. Doesn't matter how much the tenant assigned. The tenant assigned the whole thing or half of the thing. The privity of contract still exists,
Okay.
unless otherwise a novation occurred.
Makes sense.
Make sense?
Yes.
Thank you.
The breaking down of the questions, because I went back and I would have been tricked by one of those things. I just, it's very helpful to break down the answers and underline the terms of art so that I can see what's under the umbrella.
Yes, and also, tomorrow we're gonna do one, and you take control.
Okay.
See, gonna give you another landlord tenant around 9 o'clock or ish, and then you take control and you do and see if you come out with the right answers.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, B.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, all right, bye. Okay, bye guys. See you guys tomorrow around 9-ish.